On a brisk Tuesday morning, Camille Hartley walked into the boardroom expecting a routine update on donor engagement and next quarter's outreach. She had her notes prepared, projections aligned, and a clear plan to boost community partnerships. Through 7 years building Everlight Collective from a struggling nonprofit into a respected force for education reform, she had every reason to feel secure. But that feeling dissolved the moment she saw the expressions around the table. No agenda. No warm greetings. Just a folded letter with her name on it, and a sentence that would shatter her world. Effective immediately, your services are no longer required. No warning. No justification. Just the phrase new leadership direction, as if those 3 words could erase her impact, her relationships, her sacrifice. The board chair wouldn't meet her eyes. Her deputy avoided her entirely. And just like that, Camille, once the heartbeat of the organization, was out. But what they didn't know was this. 5 years ago, the late founder had quietly named Camille the successor trustee of Everlight's endowment fund. And with that, she controlled the purse strings. They had underestimated her. They thought they were closing a chapter. But Camille was only turning the page. Rachel Lynn was only 12 when she first saw her father save a life. It wasn't in an emergency room or behind a pulpit, it was in a cramped school gymnasium with folding chairs and dim lights, where he spoke gently to a room full of teenagers who thought no one understood them. He listened. He didn't judge. And somehow, with just words and presence, he helped a boy step back from the edge. That memory never left her. For 15 years, Dr. Wei Lin built Harvest Minds into a quiet force across the state, providing school-based mental health support for teens struggling with depression, anxiety, self-harm, and more. He held weekend workshops, lobbied for funding, and mentored a generation of volunteers. Rachel grew up in the corners of those rooms, doing homework beside stacks of pamphlets, helping organize campaigns about resilience and emotional literacy. Her father never pushed her to join. But the mission seeped in quietly until it was a part of her. Rachel chose her own path, earning a double degree in clinical psychology and organizational strategy, then rising to senior advisor in a top New York consulting firm. She was sharp, data-driven, and known for transforming outdated nonprofits into sustainable systems. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Her father was gone, a stroke in his sleep at age 63. No warning. No goodbye. Within days, Rachel flew back home. Not just to mourn, but to face the question she'd long avoided. What would happen to Harvest Minds? The board was reeling. Programs were stalled. Funding was uncertain. And the community was still depending on them. Rachel didn't hesitate. She left her position in New York, declined a partnership offer, and stepped into her father's shoes as executive director. But she didn't try to be him. Rachel respected his legacy, the empathy, the grassroots connection, but she also believed in scaling the mission. She wanted real-time mental health tracking tools, a school-based app for check-ins, anonymous crisis chat, hack dashboards, reach driven by data and urgency, not just intuition. At first, she was welcomed, the grieving daughter carrying the torch. But as months passed, tensions surfaced. Older board members, many of whom had served alongside her father for over a decade, grew wary. Her talk of technology, automation, and predictive modeling felt like a threat to their traditions. To them, care meant being present in person, not through screens or surveys. Rachel sensed the shift but pushed forward. She wasn't trying to replace the past. She was trying to future-proof the mission. But change, even in the name of progress, comes with resistance. And resistance was growing. For Rachel Lynn, leadership wasn't just a role, it was a calling passed down by her father. But at Harvest Minds, the legacy she tried to protect was becoming a battlefield she didn't see coming. Dean Holloway, the newly appointed board chairman, had once been her father's trusted collaborator. But he had always operated from a traditional playbook: paper records, face-to-face meetings, incremental growth. Rachel, on the other hand, believed in data dashboards, scalable models, and digital outreach. She wasn't trying to erase her father's vision, she was trying to future-proof it. But Dean didn't see it that way. To him, Rachel represented disruption. Her digital campaigns, her bold partnerships, her emphasis on youth-led feedback, all of it made him uneasy. He called her metrics vanity numbers. He rolled his eyes at the word innovation. And even when Rachel led a 40% increase in grant funding through her new donor engagement platform, Dean brushed it off as luck, or worse, as superficial. Slowly, he began to move against her. Not with open conflict, but with silence. Board materials stopped including her proposals. Meeting agendas were rewritten at the last minute, pushing her initiatives off the table. When Rachel spoke, Dean cut her off with phrases like, "Let's circle back," or "We'll revisit that in Q4. Behind closed doors, he planted seeds of doubt. Whispered concerns to other board members. "She's too green. She lacks follow-through. It's all theory with her." Rachel tried to hold her ground. She had results, she had momentum, and she had a plan. The center of that plan was Thrive Teen, a new program offering virtual mental health coaching, peer mentoring, and AI-powered early intervention tools for schools across under-resourced districts. It was her most ambitious project yet. And it was working. Pilots had shown promising engagement, and several districts were already lined up for launch. But just 3 weeks before Thrive Teen was scheduled to roll out, Rachel received an unexpected calendar invite. Special board session. No agenda. No prep materials. That Tuesday, in a sterile conference room lined with old portraits of past founders, the board, led by Dean, voted to remove her as executive director. They cited strategic misalignment and the need for more conventional leadership moving forward. Rachel didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just looked down at the folder they handed her. Severance terms, a non-disclosure clause, and a brief note thanking her for her service. As she walked out of the building, the faces of the students she had promised to reach flickered in her mind. Thrive Teen wasn't just a program, it was her promise. And Rachel Lynn wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. In the stillness of her now empty office, Rachel Lynn moved through the motions, packing books, folding documents, wrapping framed photos of smiling students and team retreats. Each item felt heavier than it should, as if the air itself bore witness to her dismissal. A soft envelope slipped between files on her desk, aged ivory paper sealed with red wax. Her name was written in ink that had begun to fade. Inside, a letter. It was from Ms. Eleanor Graves, her father's longtime personal attorney. The same woman who had retired quietly after his death, known for her discretion, her loyalty, and her ironclad contracts. Rachel hadn't heard from her in years. The letter wasn't long, but every sentence struck like a chisel. Her father, Dr. Stephen Lynn, had written a codicil to his will 4 years before his passing. In it, he transferred 85% of Harvest Mine's ownership directly to Rachel, effective on her 30th birthday. But there was a catch. The document was not to be revealed unless and until, in the attorney's judgment, the mission and leadership of the organization were under threat. Ms. Graves believed that moment had arrived. The letter included scanned copies of signed legal documents. Witnessed. Notarized. Valid. Rachel sat frozen. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel defeated. She felt clarity. She had not been fired from her own organization. She had been pushed out of a house she legally owned. But there was more. Tucked behind the letter was a second envelope labeled simply, "For her eyes only." Contained pages of handwritten notes, undated but unmistakably in her father's handwriting. Rachel recognized the looping S and the slightly slanted T. Notes chronicling conversations, irregularities in board decisions, financial inconsistencies, particularly those tied to Dean Holloway. Her father had grown suspicious of Dean long before his passing. He documented questionable consulting fees, contracts awarded without proper bidding, and travel reimbursements for trips that had little to do with organizational business. It was all there, dated, detailed, and damning. And now it was in Rachel's hands. She didn't rush, didn't send an angry email, didn't call a press conference. Instead, she spent the next few days reviewing every file, every financial report, every board transcript. Quietly, carefully, strategically. She consulted a legal team, not just any lawyers but ones who specialized in nonprofit governance and whistleblower protections. She reached out to a former board member who had resigned in protest months earlier and found to her relief an ally. Rachel wasn't seeking revenge. She wasn't trying to prove her worth anymore. She was reclaiming her name, her father's mission, and the trust of the students who had once written her thank you notes in crayon. Dean Holloway believed he had erased her. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that Rachel Lynn held not only the future of Harvest Mines but its past, its principles, and its legal majority in her hands. And this time she wasn't coming to ask for a seat at the table. She was coming to take it back. 5 days later, the conference room buzzed with the usual chatter, paper shuffling, coffee being poured, half-hearted greetings between board members. No one expected her to walk through that door. But Rachel Lynn did, calmly and deliberately, with a stack of documents in her hand and a clarity in her eyes that silenced the room. She didn't waste time. The first thing she presented was the sealed legal will, witnessed, notarized, and now verified by 2 independent legal advisors. Rachel, as of 4 years ago, had been the rightful majority owner of Harvest Mines. 85%. Her father had made his choice, not with sentiment but with purpose. And now, with Ms. Graves' letter as witness and the documents to prove it, Rachel had full legal control of the organization. There were murmurs, confusion, denial, questions bubbling up from the board. But Rachel remained composed. Then came the second wave, the data. She pulled up statistics that couldn't be debated. Since her dismissal, internal surveys showed a 27% drop in staff morale. Exit interviews, once glowing, were now filled with words like rigid, directionless, and disillusioned. Volunteer participation had plummeted by 32%, and 3 former grant partners had either paused or completely withdrawn their funding. Donor engagement was at a 5-year low. And the timing? The drop correlated precisely with the board's decision to halt Rachel's digital inclusion programs, teen mental health webinars, and school outreach pilots. She wasn't just defending her ideas anymore, she was laying bare the cost of ignoring them. Then she unveiled the last file. Meticulously documented instances of financial misconduct tied to Dean Holloway. Inflated consultant invoices. Travel reimbursements for non-existent meetings. Deferred disclosures of board voting outcomes. All of it was traceable, a trail of quiet corruption under the guise of restructuring. And while Rachel had no interest in pursuing criminal charges, she made one thing clear: transparency and accountability were returning to Harvest Mines. With 85% voting rights, she made her move. Effective immediately, Dean Holloway was removed as chairman. His name would be struck from current operations, and a formal audit would begin the following week. Then, in an unexpected twist, Rachel reinstated her original initiatives: the Thrive Teen program, the school partnerships, and the mental health chatbot for low-access communities. But she didn't stop there. She extended invitations to the younger leadership staff who had resigned in protest or been pushed out. People who had once dared to dream alongside her. The room remained silent. Dean, red-faced and quiet, gathered his things. He offered no rebuttal, no speech. Just a stiff nod and an exit that spoke volumes, not of defeat but of exposure. And as the door clicked shut behind him, something happened. One board member, the same who once rolled his eyes at her data presentations, stood. Then another. Then all of them. A slow, steady applause filled the room. They weren't just clapping for her authority. They were clapping for her courage, and for the long-overdue return of the heart and vision of Harvest Mines. 1 year later, Harvest Mines no longer resembled the fractured nonprofit it once was. It had evolved into something far greater, a living testament to how innovation could walk hand in hand with empathy. Under Rachel Lynn's quiet but resolute leadership, It had become a national symbol of what was possible when purpose met progress. The numbers told part of the story. 3 new state branches had launched within 12 months, each rooted in underserved school districts where mental health services had once been nearly non-existent. Through a partnership with a university AI lab, Rachel spearheaded the creation of an early detection system, an algorithm that monitored behavioral patterns, academic performance, and language cues in anonymous student data, flagging signs of depression long before they became crises. But the most transformative impact came from the expansion of the Thrive Teen program. Once on the brink of cancellation, the initiative now operated in over 70 schools across the country. It offered peer-led support groups, digital therapy access, and parental guidance modules, all shaped by Rachel's original vision. More than 10,000 students had already participated, and for many it was the first time they'd been able to talk openly about anxiety, stress, and fear without shame. What truly made the difference, though, wasn't just the reach. It was the tone, the culture Rachel cultivated. Staff now spoke openly of psychological safety within the organization. Volunteers felt heard. Partner schools praised the data tools not just for their efficiency but for the humanity built into them. Rachel had changed the perception of technology in mental health, not as a cold system but as a compassionate mirror that helped society listen better. And yet, Rachel never sought the spotlight. She walked the same halls her father once did, but not as an echo. She had become her own force. Where he built with wisdom and heart, she carried forward his legacy with vision and integrity. She didn't try to replicate him. She honored him by evolving his mission. At the far end of the main hallway, just beyond the conference rooms and digital war room, hung a framed photograph. It was her father mid-speech, caught in a moment of deep focus and warmth. Below the image, etched in subtle gold letters, were the words he once told her after her first day leading a group therapy session. "You believed in people. I believed in you." Rachel passed it each day, not as a ritual but as a quiet reminder of the promise she had made to him and to herself. And when asked by a reporter years later if reclaiming harvest mines had been about revenge, she simply smiled. "This was never revenge," she said. "This was renewal."